Right, so I'd like to welcome you back to another video. So it's the second one I've done in a couple of days, so that's pretty good for me with my work effort at the moment. So the video we're going to have a look at now is played in the French Team Championships, where I've recently just come back from. I had the black pieces against Krasenkow, very strong Polish player who I believe has been around 2700 strength in the past. And it was another Dutch defence, so it was very interesting. He's a very original player, and he plays some very exciting ideas which I've never come across at the start of the game. So, I mean, to be fair, when he played these ideas, I was very happy that he was messing the game up, because I always like a complicated game where we leave theory quite early, because then both sides are on their own sort of that you're not relying on these thousands of books or the latest chess-based moves that that someone might have forgot about. It's more about your own play, etc. So I was quite happy with the way the opening went, and it was a very exciting game. So let's move into it anyway. So I was black, went d4, e6. So inviting the French, as I've just recently done some DVDs on the French, which are available from my shop. Good plug. c4, f5, so back into classical Dutch, which I've been having quite a lot of fun with recently, and I'm not sure why I ever stopped playing it, to be honest, because I think it's just a good opening, especially if white does some funny things early on. So knight c3 was played, knight f6, and now my opponent played queen c2. So this is quite an interesting move, and this is one way. I mean, the main idea of this is to support the break e4. I mean, this move e4 is one move that black always has to be aware of in the classical Dutch. Generally, if white can play this move e4, white can get an advantage in a lot of circumstances. An obvious response here would be bishop to b4, pinning the knight to the king, and this is one way of playing it. Instead, I decided to play pawn to b6, which is also very logical. I want to put my bishop on b7. In general, one rule is if you get a chance to put your bishop on b7, you should always place it there, because it's very well placed on this diagonal where it can sort of aim. Ooh, that's a funny diagonal, not the one I intended. Where it can aim along here and it controls the important e4 square. So this is my aim behind b6. So a normal move here would be something like e3, and then I go bishop to b7, and probably bishop to b4 next, and good control of this e4 square. So after b6, my opponent played what must be the critical choice. He played pawn to e4, and this was quite interesting. I wasn't too concerned about this in this position, because I thought I got very speedy developments, and that's exactly what happened. So I took on e4, my opponent took back, and I went bishop to b7. And the idea is I've got a bishop to b4 check coming in at some point and quick castling. So I have to admit I was very happy around here. Now my opponent played a very interesting move here. He went knight to g5, and this is quite an aggressive square for the knight. In some cases this queen lined up against h7, and there might be some knight takes h7 tricks coming in with the queen coming down to g6, checking the king, etc. So I have to be a little bit careful with my light squares around the king side, because I have weakened them by playing the move f5 earlier on. So this is just something I have to bear in mind. But also this move knight g5, I mean, white's moved this knight a couple of times in the opening. It's generally not a good idea to move the same piece twice in the opening. So I continue developing, bishop b4 check, bishop d2, queen e7. This looks very logical. So I can give myself the option of castling the queen side sometimes. My opponent now castled queen side, so he's playing super aggressive. So all fun and games at the moment. I decided to take on d2. My opponent played queen takes d2, and now I played what must be the most critical choice, castle king side. And I thought this would lead to some race situation where I can go for his king on the queen side, and he's going to go for my king. So I was quite happy to enter this madness. My opponent played h4, one of my favourite moves. He's actually playing quite a lot like I'd play in a number of games. This opens up possibilities of if I play h6 ever, and if I suicidally take on g5, white will play h takes g5, and the h file will be open towards my king, so I certainly don't want to allow that. He also gives his rook a bit of luft, which I think we see later on in the game. The rook on h1 has potential to come around to g3, putting pressure on my king, so that's another idea. And generally h4 is quite a good attacking move. So I thought around here I had to play quite aggressively. My first thought was actually the strange move b5. and I don't know if this is good or bad. I thought it was a little bit too strange, but the idea is if he takes, I can play something like a6, and I can open up files towards his king. So this is quite an interesting idea, this move b5. I decided not to play it in the end, but I went for the more sensible c5. And my opponent now played an idea which is typical in a lot of openings and become very popular in some Queen's Indian positions, d5. And this basically gambits a pawn, but in return white gets some very dangerous open lines. So I've got to really accept the gambit. Pawn takes, bishop takes. And after white's reply queen to c2, we can see some of the dangers that I face now. For a start, rook takes d5 is probably a threat here. If knight takes, the queen comes and gollops me on h7, so I've got to be careful of that idea. So that was one nice idea. Another idea here is now this bishop can maybe come to c4 or even to d3, and white has got a lot of pressure on this diagonal, the b1 h7 diagonal, and you know, I have to start doing some counter-attacking things soon, otherwise my king is going to just become too open to attack. And in general, I mean, I always like, you know, attacking rather than defending, so that's what I was trying to aim to get here. I continue bishop to e6, so quite a solid square for bishop. My opponent now played bishop to d3, and here I could play a move like h6 or g6, but I thought, right, well, let's get a counter-attack going. So knight to c6 was played, and the idea is this knight's going to hop into either d4 or b4, and I'm going to be able to get some counterplay. b4 then comes to a2, and you know, we get some pressure against the king. So okay, my opponent took on h7 with bishop, king to h8, and now knight to f3 was played, and this is very interesting here. Now, if I go knight to b4 here, for example, I think my opponent can now play the very crafty knight to e5, and this is what I was worried about. Because if I go knight takes queen, computer says no, knight to g6 is actually checkmate here, and that would be a very embarrassing finish to the game. So this idea of knight to f3 is you know, I have to be careful of this knight hopping into g6. I mean, this is a big square for the knight. If this knight can ever get there, I'm in serious trouble. At the moment, I'm defending reasonably okay here, because my knight on s6 is a good defender of the h7 square, but I say that, well, I actually now play knight to d5. Well, the idea of this move is to give myself the queen to f6 idea at some point, which is a good move. This knight can also now maybe come around to b4, because I'm still keeping control of the e5 square of my other knight, so some various ideas. It's just one of the most aggressive moves, this knight d5. So my opponent decided to stop knight b4, he went a3, and now queen to s6 was played. So my queen's a bit more secure here. Maybe I've got ideas of queen to f4. I also can have potential pressure along this diagonal in some positions. So it's a very double-edged position, but a very exciting position where any result is possible here. So bishop to e4 was played, with the simple idea of going bishop takes d5 and then queen to h7 checkmate. So here I've got to play very sharply, and before I get mated. So knight to d4 was now came in, and the point being, after knight takes d4, c takes d4, bishop takes d5 would now be a mistake, because I can go rook to c8, and I've got a pin against white's king. I'm much clearly better here. So after c takes d4, my opponent played king to b1, and now, okay, I continued with rook on a to c8, queen to d2 was played, and this is a critical moment here. I mean, a move like queen takes f2 would be a possibility here, but queen takes f2, I don't know, I wasn't that happy about these endings, and I saw a much more interesting possibility, which I thought guaranteed me at least a draw here. So you can see, if you can see the move that I played here, it's just remember, look for all your checks and captures. And the move that I played was knight to c3 check, and this is a move I had been planning for a considerable amount of time. And the point being, after pawn takes knight, my rook actually takes on c3, and the combination of the bishop and the rook is actually very dangerous for white here, because one idea, you know, this rook to b3 check is very annoying for white. If I can just get my queen into the game as well, I'm going to have good chances to win this game now. And when you're attacking on opposite sides of the board, material is not necessarily that important. It normally goes down to who can get their attack in first, and around here it's clear that I have. So my opponent now played queen takes d4, and I went rook to b3 check, king to a1, rook to a3 check, king to here, check, king to a1, and we agreed a draw here. So, because I mean, I had a long think in this position, I couldn't see any way to make any progress here. One line which I spent my remaining time on in this position, which I thought was my only possible way to make any progress, so I wanted to get this queen into the game. And one way I was considering to do that was to go queen to e7, obviously with a threat of zooming out to a3. But my opponent, after queen to e7, well, I thought he could get away with queen to d6. And I couldn't. I mean, the only reply here that I thought made any sense was rook to f5. Now, this is a crazy idea. The idea of this is to manoeuvre my queen to f5, even when it cost the material. Before, it couldn't have moved to f5 because the bishop on e4 was controlling that square. So I'm basically forcing white to capture my rook on f5, so my queen becomes that square. But I couldn't see a good enough response from me after bishop takes f5, queen to s6 check, rook to d4, queen takes f5, rook to a4. And yeah, I couldn't see how I could continue my position here, because white always has nasty ideas of coming to my back rank. If my king was more secure, then I might be able to play a bit slower here, but it's not secure, and well, this is a very risky way to play. So instead I just decided to go back and repeat moves with this rook check idea. But anyway, very interesting idea, and an interesting way to play against the Dutch that my opponent played there. Very counter-attacking game. And well, so far in this tournament I was very happy because I've scored 1.5 out of 2 against two players that have both been over 2700 in the Classical Dutch. So Classical Dutch certainly held its own in this tournament. Again, you can go to the shop here if you want to buy the video on the Classical Dutch, which is only $19.99. It has all these lines covered in it, and it's a very, well, I think it's a good way to learn the opening if you're interested. And you can see you can get some very exciting games from this opening. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. I'll come back to you soon with my round 3 victory against Roljanov, another 2700 player, and we'll see how that game got on a bit later on. And for now, I think it's time to have a break. I've done far too much work today, so cheers for that, and catch you soon.